Angel Reese should be suspended. That is the conversation exploding around the WNBA right now, and this time, fans aren't simply arguing about a bad play or an emotional moment on the court. They are asking whether a line was crossed. Because when a player becomes involved in a controversial incident, the league has a responsibility to answer one simple question: was this just competitive basketball? Or did it go too far? And that's exactly why the latest Angel Reese controversy has people talking. Reese has never been afraid of physical basketball. She plays with intensity, emotion, and an attitude that has made her one of the most recognizable young stars in the league. But that same intensity can become a problem when the action on the court starts creating questions about player safety, sportsmanship, and whether the rules are being enforced consistently. And now fans are demanding consequences. Some are saying a suspension is absolutely necessary. Others believe Angel is simply being targeted because of her reputation, her personality, and the enormous attention surrounding her every move. But here's where this gets really interesting. Because the debate isn't just about Angel Reese. It's about the WNBA's standard. If another player committed the exact same action, would the punishment be identical? Would the league step in immediately? Or would officials once again allow emotions to escalate until somebody gets seriously hurt? That's the question nobody can ignore. And with Angel already at the center of so many heated WNBA storylines, this latest controversy could become much bigger than one game. Because if the league decides to suspend her, it sends a powerful message. But if the league does nothing, fans are going to ask whether the rules actually apply equally to everyone. So what exactly happened? Why are people demanding a suspension? And could this controversy create consequences for Angel Reese that go far beyond one game? Let's break down everything, because this situation is much bigger than it first appears. To understand why this controversy has exploded so quickly, you have to understand the position Angel Reese occupies in the WNBA. Angel isn't just another player. Every move she makes gets amplified. Every argument becomes a headline. Every hard foul becomes a debate. Every reaction gets clipped, reposted, analyzed, and turned into a conversation that can last for days. And that's because Reese entered the league with an enormous spotlight already following her. Her college career created a massive fan base, but it also created a huge number of critics. She became one of the most recognizable names in women's basketball, and that visibility followed her directly into the professional game. So when Angel plays aggressively, people don't always see the same thing. Her supporters see competitiveness. Her critics see recklessness. Her teammates may see passion. Opposing fans may see unnecessary physicality. And that difference in perception is exactly why this latest controversy has become so explosive. Because basketball is an emotional sport. Players are going to compete. Players are going to argue. Players are going to celebrate. And physical contact is unavoidable. But there is a line. The difficult part is determining exactly where that line is. That's where the league's responsibility becomes extremely important. The WNBA can't simply punish a player because fans are angry. At the same time, it can't ignore conduct that genuinely violates league rules simply because the player involved is popular. The standard has to be consistent. And that's why the calls for an Angel Reese suspension are getting attention. Fans aren't only asking, did Angel do something wrong? They are asking something much bigger. What would the league do if anyone else did it? That question has followed the WNBA throughout several controversial moments. As the league has become more popular, every physical incident receives significantly more attention than it did in previous years. There are more cameras, more social media clips, more national coverage, more fans watching individual players instead of simply watching teams. And that means incidents that once disappeared after the final whistle can now dominate the entire conversation. A single 10-second clip can reach millions of people before the players have even left the arena. And Angel Reese understands that reality better than most. She knows every reaction can become content. She knows every confrontation can become a headline. She knows that her name alone generates enormous engagement. That's why the criticism surrounding her can feel relentless. But there's another side to this. Being heavily scrutinized doesn't mean a player should be protected from legitimate criticism. If an action crosses the rules, it should be addressed. That's professional sports. Stars aren't supposed to be above consequences. In fact, the biggest stars often have the greatest responsibility because younger players watch them. Fans watch them. Children watch them. Future WNBA players watch them. And when a superstar handles a heated situation professionally, it sets an example. But when a situation escalates, the league has to make sure emotions don't become an excuse. That's the heart of this debate. Some people believe Angel Reese's competitive personality is being unfairly turned into a villain narrative. They argue that she plays hard, fights for rebounds, battles physically, and refuses to back down. To them, asking for a suspension is an overreaction. They believe the league should allow players to compete with emotion instead of trying to sanitize the sport. And that's a legitimate argument. Because nobody wants women's basketball to become a sport where players are afraid to play physically. The WNBA needs intensity. It needs rivalries. It needs emotion. It needs players who care deeply about winning. That's part of what makes professional sports compelling. But there's another argument. Critics say competitiveness doesn't automatically excuse everything. You can play hard without crossing the line. You can be physical without targeting an opponent. You can be emotional without escalating a confrontation. And if the league believes a player crossed that boundary, consequences shouldn't depend on how famous that player is. That's the uncomfortable middle ground. And Angel Reese now finds herself directly in the center of it. The situation is also complicated by the larger history surrounding Reese. She has already experienced some of the most intense scrutiny in women's sports. Her rivalry-driven moments have generated millions of views. Her interactions with opponents have become major talking points. And her confidence has made her both extremely popular and extremely polarizing. For some fans, that's exactly what the WNBA needs. They see Angel as someone who brings personality to the league. Someone who isn't afraid to speak her mind. Someone who understands how to build a personal brand. Someone who attracts attention to women's basketball. But critics see that same confidence differently. They believe the constant drama surrounding her sometimes overshadows the basketball itself. And whenever another controversy appears, those existing opinions immediately return. That's why this story has escalated so quickly. People aren't watching the incident in isolation. They are watching it through everything they already believe about Angel Reese. If someone already supports her, they may see the latest controversy as another example of unfair criticism. If someone already dislikes her style, they may see it as proof that the league needs to intervene. And that creates an enormous divide. But beneath all the social media arguments is a much more serious question. What does the WNBA actually want its standard of physical play to look like? Because if the league wants to become one of the biggest professional sports leagues in the world, consistency matters. Players need to know what is acceptable. Coaches need to know what will be punished. Fans need to understand why one action results in a warning while another results in a suspension. And the league needs to communicate those decisions clearly. Otherwise, every controversial moment becomes a debate about favoritism. And that's the last thing the WNBA needs. Especially now. The league is experiencing unprecedented attention. More people are watching. More people are talking. More celebrities are showing up. More young fans are becoming invested. And with that growth comes responsibility. Every controversial incident becomes a test of the league's credibility. If officials punish too aggressively, critics can argue that the league is trying to control physical competition. If officials don't punish enough, others can argue that player safety isn't being taken seriously. There is no easy answer. But there is one thing everyone should agree on. The rules have to be applied consistently. And that's why the Angel Reese suspension debate isn't going away. Because even if the league ultimately decides that a suspension isn't warranted, it still has to explain why. And if the league does suspend her, it has to make clear exactly which standard was violated. No vague statements. No confusing explanations. No perception that one player receives special treatment. Just a clear decision based on the rules. And that decision could have consequences far beyond Angel Reese herself. Because whatever the WNBA decides here may influence how future incidents are handled. It could establish a precedent. It could change how players approach physical confrontations. And it could even change how fans interpret the league's disciplinary system. That's why the pressure is building. Angel Reese may be at the center of the controversy, but the real test is bigger than one player. It's a test of the WNBA's authority, its consistency, and its willingness to enforce its own standards, even when the player involved is one of the league's biggest stars. Now this is where the situation gets much more serious. Because once the debate moved beyond social media arguments and into questions about player safety and league discipline, the conversation completely changed. Fans were no longer simply saying, "I don't like what Angel Reese did." They were asking, should the league actually punish her? And that's a completely different question. In professional basketball, emotions are expected. Physicality is expected. Players are going to fight for rebounds. They are going to battle for position. They are going to protect the ball. They are going to get frustrated when officials make a call they don't agree with. That's basketball. But there is a difference between playing aggressively and creating a situation that officials believe crosses the line. And that's where Angel Reese's situation becomes complicated. Because Angel has built her reputation around being extremely competitive. She doesn't play timidly. She doesn't back away from physical contact. And she has never seemed interested in making herself smaller just to make opponents comfortable. For many fans, that's exactly why they love watching her. But the same personality that makes her exciting can also make every controversial moment appear bigger. A normal emotional reaction from another player might disappear within hours. When Angel Reese is involved, it can become a national conversation. One clip gets posted. Another account reposts it. Then commentary channels begin analyzing it. Then fans start comparing it with previous incidents. And suddenly, an isolated moment becomes part of a much larger narrative. That's what happened here. People began bringing up other moments involving Angel. They started asking whether there was a pattern. They questioned whether officials had been too lenient. And some fans went even further, demanding that the league send a message. But here's where we need to separate emotion from evidence. A player shouldn't be suspended simply because social media is angry. A suspension should be based on the actual rules, the official review, and the circumstances surrounding the incident. That's important because social media often creates its own version of reality. A 10-second video doesn't always show what happened before the camera started recording. It may not show what happened immediately afterward. It may not show the official's perspective. And it certainly doesn't automatically tell us what was going through a player's mind. That's why the league has to review these situations carefully. But careful review doesn't mean ignoring the controversy. If the league determines that an action was serious enough for additional discipline, then it needs to act. And this is where fans are divided. One side says, Angel Reese is being held to a different standard. They point toward the physical nature of women's basketball and argue that players have always played with emotion. They believe the attention surrounding Angel makes ordinary basketball incidents look much worse. They also believe some critics are waiting for any opportunity to attack her. The other side says, her popularity doesn't matter. If the action violated the rules, they argue, then the league should punish it exactly the same way it would punish anyone else. And honestly, that's the standard that makes the most sense. Because the worst possible outcome isn't necessarily a suspension. The worst outcome is inconsistency. Imagine two players committing similar actions and receiving completely different punishments. One gets fined. The other gets suspended. Without a clear explanation, fans immediately start asking why. Was it because one player is more famous? Was it because one player has a larger fan base? Was it because one team is more valuable? Or was there actually a meaningful difference between the incidents? The league has to answer those questions. And that's why this Angel Reese controversy could become important. Not because Angel is bigger than the WNBA. But because moments like this help define what the league considers acceptable. And the timing couldn't be more significant. The WNBA is growing. The audiences are growing. The rivalries are becoming bigger. The players have more personalities and more media attention. That means physical confrontations are going to receive even more scrutiny. The league cannot control what fans say online. But it can control how clearly it communicates its disciplinary decisions. And that's where Angel's case becomes a test. If the league believes she crossed the line, say exactly why. If the league believes the incident doesn't justify suspension, explain that too. Because fans deserve consistency. Players deserve clarity. And the league deserves credibility. There is another element that shouldn't be ignored. Angel Reese is still a young professional player. That doesn't mean she should receive special treatment. But it does mean every disciplinary decision becomes part of her development. A suspension can hurt a team. It can hurt a player's momentum. It can change how opponents approach her. And it can influence how the public views her. At the same time, consequences can also teach players where the boundaries are. That's how professional sports work. The goal isn't simply punishment. The goal is accountability. And if the league decides that Angel needs to be held accountable, the message should be clear. You can compete. You can be physical. You can be passionate. But there are limits. And those limits apply to everybody. That last part is critical. Everybody. Not just Angel Reese. Not just rookies. Not just stars. Not just players who have controversial reputations. Everybody. Because if the WNBA wants fans to respect its disciplinary system, the standard cannot change depending on who's involved. And that's why this story isn't going away anytime soon. The controversy has opened a much larger conversation about the identity of the league itself. Does the WNBA want to be known for intense, physical competition? Absolutely. But can it maintain that intensity while protecting players from unnecessary escalation? That's the balance the league has to find. And Angel Reese just happens to be standing directly in the middle of that debate. What's fascinating is that this situation could actually affect Angel's reputation in two completely different ways. If the league suspends her, critics may say the punishment proves that her style has finally gone too far. But her supporters could respond that she's being unfairly targeted. If the league doesn't suspend her, critics may say the WNBA is protecting one of its biggest stars. Her supporters, meanwhile, will argue that the league correctly recognized the incident as part of normal competitive basketball. Either way, somebody is going to be unhappy. And that's why the league's explanation may matter almost as much as the punishment itself. Because when millions of people are watching, silence creates speculation. A vague statement creates theories. A confusing decision creates controversy. But a clear explanation gives everyone something concrete to evaluate. And now all eyes are on what happens next. Will Angel Reese face additional discipline? Will the league review the incident and decide no suspension is necessary? Will teammates defend her? Will opponents respond? And most importantly, will Angel herself address the controversy? Because when a player becomes the center of a national debate, eventually the story moves beyond the court. It becomes about reputation. It becomes about leadership. It becomes about what kind of player Angel wants to be. And that is why the next development could be even bigger than the original incident. Because once the league makes its decision, the debate won't end. It will only begin. Here is where this situation gets even more serious. Because this is not simply a question of whether Angel Reese is emotional on the basketball court. There is an actual league rule sitting directly in front of her. And right now, Reese is only one technical foul away from an automatic one-game suspension. As of the latest reporting through August 14, Reese has 7 technical fouls in the 2026 regular season. The WNBA's current system triggers a one-game suspension when a player reaches 8. After that, additional suspensions come at technical number 10, number 12, and so on. That means the next technical foul isn't just another number. It could cost Angel Reese an entire game. And for the Atlanta Dream, that could be a massive problem. Think about what Reese means to that team. She isn't simply another rotation player who can be replaced for one night. She's one of the team's most important rebounders, interior defenders, physical presences, and emotional leaders. So if she gets that 8th technical, Atlanta doesn't just lose a player. They lose one of the most difficult players in the league to replace. And that is why this situation has become a ticking clock. The interesting part is that Reese has already been here before. In 2025, while playing for the Chicago Sky, she reached 8 technical fouls and received an automatic one-game suspension. The WNBA officially announced that suspension after Reese picked up her 8th technical with 46 seconds remaining in the second quarter against Connecticut. So this isn't theoretical. She knows exactly what happens. She knows the consequences. She knows that the 8th technical means she is sitting out. And yet, she has once again reached 7. That is what makes the debate so intense. Critics are looking at the pattern and asking whether Reese needs to change the way she handles confrontation. Her supporters, meanwhile, argue that intensity is part of what makes her effective. And honestly, both sides have a point. Because Angel Reese's physicality and emotion aren't completely separate from her success. She plays with tremendous energy. She attacks the glass. She battles for position. She fights for every possession. She doesn't play like someone trying to quietly accumulate statistics. She plays like someone trying to impose herself on the game. But that style comes with a cost. When you're constantly playing at maximum intensity, there's always a possibility that one emotional reaction becomes one technical foul too many. And that's exactly where Reese is right now. One moment. One argument. One reaction. One conversation with an official that goes too far. That's all it takes. And suddenly, the headline changes from Angel Reese is one of the WNBA's fiercest competitors to Angel Reese suspended. And there is another layer to this. Reese isn't the only major WNBA star walking this technical foul tightrope. Caitlin Clark is also sitting at 7 technical fouls according to the latest available numbers. Natasha Cloud and Kahlia Copper are also among the league leaders. That means the league is dealing with a broader issue. This isn't necessarily just about Angel Reese. The WNBA is seeing increased attention around officiating, player complaints, physical interactions, and technical fouls during a season with more games because of league expansion. One recent analysis noted that the league was tracking toward another record number of technical fouls. But Reese's situation is different because of her history. Fans remember 2025. They remember the suspension. They remember the controversy surrounding her. And now they are watching the same warning signs appear again. That's why every reaction from Reese is being analyzed. Every time she walks toward an official, people are watching. Every time she reacts to contact, people are watching. Every time she gets into an exchange with an opponent, people are watching. And that can create a dangerous psychological cycle. The more people expect a player to get a technical, the more every emotional moment gets interpreted through that expectation. One side sees passion. Another sees unnecessary confrontation. One side sees a player standing up for herself. Another sees someone putting her team at risk. And the truth may sit somewhere in the middle. Angel Reese doesn't need to become emotionless. She doesn't need to stop competing. She doesn't need to change the personality that helped make her one of the biggest names in women's basketball. But she may need to become smarter about when she chooses to fight. Because there is a difference between fighting for a rebound and fighting with a referee. There is a difference between physical basketball and losing your composure. And there is a difference between being intimidating and giving the officials a reason to put you on the bench. That distinction could determine whether Reese finishes the regular season without another suspension. And Atlanta has every reason to care. The Dream traded for Reese in April 2026, moving her from Chicago in exchange for future first-round picks. That move wasn't made because Atlanta wanted a quiet player. They wanted impact. They wanted rebounding. They wanted physicality. They wanted a player capable of changing the identity of their team. And Reese has delivered that kind of presence. But the Dream also need her available. That's the part that cannot be ignored. You can love Angel Reese's fire and still recognize that a suspension hurts the team. You can support her competitiveness and still believe she needs to control certain moments. And perhaps that is the biggest lesson from this entire situation. The best competitors aren't necessarily the ones who react the most. Sometimes the strongest response is walking away. Sometimes the smartest move is saying nothing. Sometimes winning the argument isn't worth losing the game. And Angel Reese is now at a point where that calculation matters more than ever. Because if she picks up technical no. 8. The league won't need to debate whether she deserves a suspension. The rule already decides it. One game. No argument. No exception simply because she's a superstar. And that is why the next few games could be absolutely crucial. Reese has already shown that she can survive intense scrutiny. She has already shown that she can handle criticism. She has already shown that she can turn controversy into motivation. But now she has to show something else. Control. Because the biggest challenge facing Angel Reese may not be the opponent standing across from her. It may be the emotion building inside her. And if she can control that emotion, she could turn this entire controversy around. But if she can't, one more technical foul could force her to watch her teammates compete from the sidelines. And that is exactly why the WNBA, and Angel Reese's fans, will be watching every single whistle from here on out. And now we get to the part that makes this situation even more complicated. Because Angel Reese is not simply sitting at 7 technical fouls and waiting for number 8. She is still playing the same aggressive, physical style that has helped make her one of the WNBA's biggest stars. And just recently, that intensity was on full display. During Atlanta's game against Connecticut, Reese was hit in the head during a layup attempt by Aaliyah Edwards. The contact escalated into a heated confrontation, with Edwards' foul ultimately upgraded to a flagrant one after review. Reese later said Edwards had grabbed her neck during the sequence. Now think about the timing. Reese is already sitting one technical foul away from an automatic suspension. Then she finds herself involved in another highly physical incident. Even though that particular play did not automatically give Reese another technical foul, it shows exactly why the situation is so dangerous. Because Angel Reese is playing in an environment where emotions can explode in seconds. One hard foul. One shove. One argument. One reaction. And suddenly, everything changes. That's why this isn't simply about whether Reese is too aggressive. It's about whether she can protect herself from situations that could potentially put her one step closer to a suspension. And there is something else fans need to understand. Reese doesn't control every confrontation. Sometimes she is the person receiving the contact. Sometimes she's reacting to something that happens to her. Sometimes the officials have to determine whether an incident deserves a foul, a flagrant, or a technical. That means simply saying Angel needs to calm down doesn't tell the entire story. But neither does saying Angel is always right. The reality is much more complicated. And that is where the criticism becomes legitimate. If Reese knows she is sitting on 7 technical fouls, she has to understand that opponents may try to frustrate her. They know her reputation. They know how emotional games can become around her. They know that getting under an opponent's skin can change the rhythm of a game. So the question becomes, can Angel Reese refuse to take the bait? That may be the biggest test of her maturity right now. Because the easiest thing in basketball is to react. Someone says something. You respond. Someone bumps you. You respond. Someone celebrates in your face. You respond. But elite players eventually learn something different. They learn that sometimes the best response is scoring on the next possession. Sometimes it's grabbing the rebound. Sometimes it's blocking the shot. Sometimes it's simply walking away. Because every time Reese reacts emotionally, she potentially gives the other team exactly what it wants. And that is why the technical foul situation has become bigger than one player. It has become a strategic issue. Atlanta needs Angel Reese on the floor. Her teammates need her. Her coaching staff needs her. And the fans want to see her compete. But if she reaches 8 technical fouls, the decision is no longer in Atlanta's hands. The WNBA rule is clear. An 8th regular season technical foul results in an automatic 1-game suspension without pay. Additional suspensions follow for every 2 technical fouls after that. Reese experienced this firsthand in 2025, when her 8th technical triggered a 1-game suspension. That history makes this year's situation even more fascinating. Because Reese has already learned the lesson once. Now she's being asked whether she can apply it. And that's where critics are going to be watching closely. They will say, "You knew what was coming." Supporters will say, "She shouldn't have to change who she is." But perhaps the answer is somewhere between those two positions. Angel Reese doesn't need to stop being Angel Reese. She needs to become a smarter version of Angel Reese. That's the difference. The fire doesn't have to disappear. The competitiveness doesn't have to disappear. The physicality doesn't have to disappear. But the unnecessary reaction, that may need to disappear. Because one of the most frustrating things for a player is watching from the bench while her teammates are fighting without her. And imagine how devastating that would be if it happened at a critical point in Atlanta's season. Reese could dominate one game, then pick up a technical, and suddenly she's suspended for the next. That could affect Atlanta's rotation, defensive strategy, rebounding, and momentum. And unlike an ordinary missed game, a suspension comes with an entirely different narrative. People would immediately start debating her behavior. Sports shows would discuss it. Social media would explode. Fans would divide into camps. Some would defend her. Others would say the suspension was inevitable. And Reese would have to answer questions about it all over again. That's why controlling the next few moments matters so much. There is another interesting aspect to this story. Reese isn't the only star currently walking this technical foul tightrope. Caitlin Clark has also been among the WNBA leaders in technical fouls this season, with recent reporting placing both Clark and Reese at 7 at one point in the season. That means this isn't necessarily an Angel Reese problem. It is becoming part of a much larger league-wide conversation. The WNBA has seen a significant number of technical fouls this season, with one recent analysis projecting the league could finish with roughly 222 technical fouls, well above the previous record of 173. So perhaps the real story isn't simply Angel Reese should be suspended. Maybe the bigger question is, why are so many of the league's biggest stars constantly finding themselves involved in technical foul controversies? That's a much more interesting discussion. Because the league is growing. The games are more intense. The rivalries are stronger. The players are more competitive. And the audience is enormous. Every confrontation becomes content. Every argument becomes a viral clip. Every technical foul becomes a debate. That creates pressure on everyone. But Reese has something even more difficult to deal with. She is constantly compared to other stars. Her name is attached to some of the WNBA's biggest storylines. And whether she likes it or not, her every reaction gets amplified. So the smartest thing she can do now is take control of the narrative herself. Not through a statement. Not through an argument. Not through social media. Through basketball. If Angel Reese can finish the season without picking up another technical, the conversation changes completely. Suddenly people aren't talking about a potential suspension. They are talking about discipline, growth, leadership, maturity, and competitive intelligence. But if she gets technical number 8, then the headline writes itself. Angel Reese suspended. And that is exactly what she needs to avoid. Because right now, the league isn't asking her to become less passionate. It's asking her to become more calculated. And that could be the difference between watching the biggest games of the season from the court or watching them from the bench. And this is where the Angel Reese controversy becomes much bigger than Angel Reese herself. Because if Reese does receive another technical foul, the punishment is not something the Atlanta Dream can negotiate away. The current WNBA rules make the consequence automatic. The 8th regular season technical foul brings a 1-game suspension, and every additional 2 technical fouls after that bring another suspension. Reese already experienced that system in 2025, when her 8th technical resulted in a 1-game suspension while she was with Chicago. So now imagine the next time Reese gets into a heated exchange. The referee blows the whistle. Reese disagrees. She walks over. The conversation gets louder. The official reaches into the pocket. Technical foul. That's it. No debate. No second chance. No, but she was emotional. She sits. And suddenly the headline becomes enormous. But here's the thing. The league has another problem on its hands. Because technical fouls aren't affecting only Angel Reese. Recent reporting shows Reese and Caitlin Clark among the WNBA leaders with 7 technical fouls, while several other major players are also accumulating them at a high rate. And that tells us something important. The league isn't dealing with one difficult player. It is dealing with a broader increase in on-court tension. Through 242 games, officials had already called 163 technical fouls, putting the league on pace to potentially surpass its previous record. So when people say, "Why is Angel Reese always in these situations?" there is another question worth asking. Why are so many WNBA stars finding themselves in these situations? The game is getting more physical. The attention is getting bigger. The rivalries are becoming more intense. And every confrontation is now instantly clipped, posted, analyzed, debated and replayed thousands of times. That changes the atmosphere. A player can have a disagreement with an official for 5 seconds, and within minutes, millions of people may have an opinion about it. And Angel Reese is one of the players most exposed to that environment. Her personality makes her a lightning rod. Her physical style makes her part of physical confrontations. And her enormous popularity means every incident becomes a story. But here's the part Reese has to understand. Popularity doesn't protect you from the rulebook. If anything, being one of the league's biggest stars means there is more pressure to set the example. That's not necessarily fair. But it's reality. When you're a superstar, people aren't just watching what you do. They are watching what younger players might copy. They are watching how you respond to adversity. They are watching whether you can control yourself when the game becomes uncomfortable. And that is why the next few games could tell us something important about Angel Reese's evolution. Will she continue reacting immediately? Or will she start choosing her battles? Because there is a difference between being emotional and being reckless. There is a difference between showing frustration and giving officials a reason to penalize you. And there is a difference between standing up for yourself and allowing an opponent to drag you into a situation that hurts your own team. Reese has already shown that she can play through enormous pressure. Now she has to show that she can manage it. And perhaps that is the biggest challenge of her career so far. Not rebounding. Not scoring. Not defending. Discipline. The irony is that the thing people love most about Angel Reese may also be the thing that creates her biggest problem. Her fire. Her confidence. Her willingness to challenge people. Her refusal to back down. Those qualities can make a player special. But if they are not controlled, they can become weaknesses. And opponents know that. They know Reese is emotional. They know she competes hard. They know she doesn't like backing down. So if you're playing against her, why wouldn't you try to frustrate her? Why wouldn't you make the game uncomfortable? Why wouldn't you test her patience? Because every second she spends arguing is a second she's not focused on basketball. And every technical foul she receives brings her closer to sitting out. That's the trap. And Reese has to avoid it. The smartest opponents don't necessarily need to beat her physically. They can try to beat her mentally. Get her frustrated. Get her talking. Get her reacting. Then let the officials handle the rest. That's why the 7th technical foul was such a warning sign. It came after Reese argued a missed call against Seattle, according to reporting at the time. That technical put her one away from the automatic suspension threshold. And now the pressure is enormous. Imagine being Angel Reese walking onto the court knowing that every emotional reaction could potentially cost you a game. That's not easy. But that's professional basketball. And that's where leadership comes into play. A leader doesn't have to be silent. A leader doesn't have to accept every bad call. A leader doesn't have to pretend nothing happened. But sometimes leadership means knowing when to walk away. Sometimes it means letting your coach argue. Sometimes it means letting your teammates handle the officials. Sometimes it means taking the frustration and turning it into the next possession. And that could be the biggest adjustment Reese needs to make. Because Atlanta doesn't need her fighting referees. Atlanta needs her fighting for rebounds. They need her protecting the paint. They need her creating second chances. They need her presence on the floor. The dream didn't bring Reese in to watch her sit on the bench. They brought her in because she can change games. So the worst possible outcome is for Reese to become her own opponent. And that's what the suspension argument is really about. It's not about whether Angel Reese should stop being passionate. It's about whether she can transform passion into control. Because if she does, this controversy could eventually become a positive story. People could look back and say, Angel Reese learned. She matured. She adjusted. She figured out how to stay aggressive without constantly risking technical fouls. But if the next technical comes, then everything changes. And fans are going to ask the question that started this entire debate. Should Angel Reese have been suspended? The answer may already be written into the rulebook. But the bigger question is whether Reese can make sure the league never gets the opportunity to enforce it again this season. And with only one technical standing between her and another suspension, every whistle from here on out could feel like a warning shot. And now we reach the moment that could determine how this entire controversy ends. Angel Reese is sitting dangerously close to the WNBA's suspension threshold, with recent reporting listing her at 7 technical fouls. That means one more technical could trigger an automatic one-game suspension. But here's what makes the situation so fascinating. Reese doesn't necessarily have to change her personality. She doesn't have to stop being aggressive. She doesn't have to stop competing. She doesn't have to suddenly become emotionless. What she needs is control. Because the league has already shown that it will enforce the technical foul threshold. Reese learned that lesson last season, when her 8th technical foul resulted in a one-game suspension. So this time, there can be no excuse that she didn't know the consequences. She knows. Her coaches know. Her teammates know. And every opponent knows. That makes the next few games incredibly important. Because opponents may try to test her. They may try to make her uncomfortable. They may try to get physical. They may try to talk. They may try to push her buttons. And Reese has to understand that the easiest way for another team to hurt Atlanta may not be by stopping her physically. It may be by getting her emotionally involved. Think about what happened recently against Connecticut. Reese was struck in the head during a layup attempt, and the confrontation escalated afterward. The foul against Aaliyah Edwards was upgraded to a flagrant 1 following review. Reese finished that game with 15 rebounds and 4 blocks despite shooting 3-4-13. That game is actually a perfect example of why this issue isn't black and white. Reese wasn't simply looking for trouble. She was involved in a genuinely physical basketball sequence. She was hit. She reacted. And the officials ultimately determined that Edwards' foul deserved a flagrant. But that's exactly why Reese has to be careful. Because once emotions explode, everyone gets involved. Players react. Officials react. Coaches react. Fans react. And suddenly, a basketball possession becomes a completely different story. For Reese, the danger is that one emotional moment could become technical number 8. And once that happens, the debate is over. She sits. Atlanta has to adjust. And the entire sports media cycle becomes about Angel Reese's suspension. That's the outcome she has to avoid. But there is a positive side to all of this. Reese has an opportunity to completely flip the narrative. Imagine if she finishes the season without another technical. Imagine if she becomes one of the most disciplined players on the court despite all the pressure. Imagine if opponents try to provoke her, and she simply turns around and dominates them on the scoreboard. That would send a completely different message. It would show growth. It would show maturity. And most importantly, it would show that Angel Reese can control the intensity that makes her so dangerous. Because that's the evolution every great competitor eventually has to make. Early in a career, emotion can fuel you. Later in a career, Discipline has to control that emotion. You don't lose the fire. You learn how to aim it. And that's exactly what Reese needs to do. She has already established herself as a physical force. She has already shown that she can dominate the glass. She has already shown that she can defend. She has already shown that she can handle enormous attention. Now she has to prove she can handle the officials. And that's a completely different challenge. Because officials aren't opponents. You don't beat them. You don't overpower them. You don't intimidate them. You have to work within the system. And if you disagree with a call, sometimes the smartest response is simply to move on. That doesn't mean the call was correct. It means the player understands the bigger picture. One technical foul may feel insignificant in the moment. But when you're sitting at 7, it's not insignificant. It's everything. And that's why every Angel Reese reaction is going to be under a microscope. Every argument. Every gesture. Every confrontation. Every whistle. Every conversation with a referee. Fans will be watching. And honestly, that's probably the hardest part. Because when everyone expects you to lose your temper, staying calm becomes even harder. But that's also what makes it an opportunity. Reese can change the conversation without saying a single word. She can simply play. Rebound. Defend. Run. Score. Pass. And walk away when the whistle blows. That's it. No drama required. And if she does that, the story changes. Instead of Angel Reese is one technical away from suspension. The headline becomes Angel Reese learned how to control the chaos. That's a much better story. And for Atlanta, it's the story they desperately need. Because the Dream didn't bring Reese to Atlanta to create headlines. They brought her because they believe she can help them win. Her availability matters. Her physical presence matters. Her rebounding matters. Her defense matters. And in a league where every possession can decide a game, losing an important player for a suspension is a luxury no contender wants. That's why this controversy should ultimately be about more than punishment. It should be about development. Angel Reese is still young. She's still learning how to navigate professional basketball. She's still learning how different the WNBA environment is from college. And she's playing in one of the most scrutinized eras in women's basketball history. That combination creates enormous pressure. But pressure can produce growth. And perhaps that's what we are about to see. The league has a rule. Reese knows the rule. One more technical could put her on the sidelines. But nobody can force that technical to happen. That decision, at least in part, remains in Reese's hands. She can choose the argument. Or she can choose the next possession. She can respond to the opponent. Or she can respond with basketball. She can chase the referee's decision. Or she can chase the rebound. And those choices could determine whether this becomes another suspension story. Or the moment Angel Reese finally proves she has learned from the past. Because right now, the biggest opponent standing between Angel Reese and another suspension might not be Caitlin Clark. It might not be Aaliyah Edwards. It might not be another WNBA team. It might simply be Angel Reese's ability to stay composed when everything around her becomes chaotic. And if she gets that right, this controversy could disappear almost as quickly as it started. But if technical number 8 arrives, then the WNBA will have no choice. The suspension will come. And the debate that started with should Angel Reese be suspended will suddenly become, why didn't Angel Reese see this coming? That is the line she is walking right now. One technical away. One emotional moment away. One whistle away. And with the WNBA already experiencing a major increase in technical fouls across the league, this pressure isn't going away anytime soon. So the next time Angel Reese gets knocked down, challenged, frustrated, or disagrees with a call, watch what she does next. Because that reaction could tell us everything. Is she going to fight the moment? Or is she going to control it? The choice could determine whether Angel Reese finishes this season on the court, or watches from the sidelines. And now I want to hear from you. Do you think Angel Reese should actually be suspended, or do you think the backlash has gone way too far? Was this simply an emotional moment in a highly competitive game, or did Reese cross a line that deserves real consequences? Drop your opinion in the comments, because I want to know exactly where you stand. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we are keeping our eyes on every major WNBA development. If the league announces disciplinary action, if Angel Reese responds publicly, or if this controversy takes another unexpected turn, we'll be here to break it all down. So like this video, share it with another basketball fan, and subscribe for more WNBA news, controversies, and the stories everyone is talking about. Thanks for watching, and remember, the conversation doesn't end when the game does.